He used to think anxiety came out of nowhere, that it simply appeared without warning, hijacking his body and his thoughts for no clear reason. But over time, a quiet suspicion began to form in the back of his mind. Maybe anxiety wasn't random at all. Maybe it was being triggered by something he hadn't learned to see yet. At the time, he didn't know what that something was. He only knew that the feeling kept returning. For him, anxiety wasn't loud at first. It started subtly, almost politely. A slight tightening in his chest, a sense of urgency without a task attached to it. His mind would begin scanning for problems, even on days when nothing seemed wrong. He went through his routines, answered messages, completed responsibilities, all while carrying a tension that never fully left his body. The trigger revealed itself in quiet moments. It showed up when things slowed down, when there was no distraction, no noise, no immediate demand. Silence was when his anxiety became strongest. Sitting alone, waiting for something, lying in bed at night, those were the moments his mind turned against him. Thoughts about the future rushed in uninvited. What if something goes wrong? What if I'm not prepared? What if I lose control? His body reacted as if these questions were warnings, not thoughts. He didn't realize that silence wasn't the real trigger. Uncertainty was. Whenever he couldn't predict what would happen next, his nervous system panicked, waiting for a reply. Not knowing how a situation would turn out, feeling unsure about decisions he had already made. His mind treated uncertainty like danger, flooding his body with fear to force him into control mode. But what happened next quietly changed how he understood his anxiety. One evening, after hours of restlessness, he noticed a pattern he had never clearly seen before. Anxiety surged when he demanded certainty from a future that couldn't give it. The more he tried to mentally prepare for every possible outcome, the more anxious he became. It felt like his mind was running simulations endlessly, hoping that if it imagined every scenario, nothing bad could surprise him. He didn't realize that this habit was exhausting him. For years, his way of managing anxiety had been avoidance and control. He avoided situations that made him feel uncertain. He distracted himself whenever silence appeared. He tried to think his way out of fear. When none of it worked, he blamed himself for being weak or overly sensitive. Why couldn't he just relax like everyone else seemed to? What followed challenged everything he believed about managing anxiety. Instead of trying to eliminate the trigger, he began to observe it. When anxiety appeared, he asked a different question. What am I trying to control right now? He noticed that his fear wasn't warning him about real danger. It was reacting to the discomfort of not knowing. Slowly, he started to see anxiety not as a threat, but as a signal that his mind was demanding certainty where none was possible. Managing it didn't mean forcing calm. It meant staying present when uncertainty showed up. When anxiety tightened his chest, he stopped rushing to fix it. He noticed his breathing without trying to change it. He let anxious thoughts pass without answering them. When his mind insisted on predicting the future, he gently brought his attention back to what was actually happening around him. This didn't make anxiety disappear overnight. Some days, the trigger was just as strong as before. Silence still felt uncomfortable. Waiting still made his heart race, but something subtle shifted. Anxiety no longer felt like an emergency. It became a familiar sensation he could tolerate instead of fight. There were setbacks, days when he slipped back into old habits, checking his thoughts constantly, seeking reassurance, avoiding stillness. On those days, anxiety felt overwhelming again. But instead of judging himself, he reminded himself that managing anxiety wasn't about perfection, it was about awareness. He began to trust himself more, trust that he could sit with uncertainty without collapsing, trust that uncomfortable feelings wouldn't destroy him, trust that anxiety could rise and fall on its own if he stopped feeding it with resistance. He started asking questions he had never allowed himself to ask. What would happen if I stopped preparing for everything? What am I afraid uncertainty will take from me? How much of my anxiety comes from trying to feel safe all the time? These questions didn't erase the fear, but they softened it. There was one realization he only understood later. Anxiety wasn't asking to be controlled. It was asking to be understood. And the moment he stopped treating uncertainty like an enemy, his biggest trigger lost some of its power. He still has anxious moments. Silence still feels uncomfortable at times. Waiting still triggers tension. But now, when anxiety shows up, he knows what's happening. He knows it's his mind reacting to uncertainty, not a sign that something bad is about to happen. There's something he discovered along this process that might help others too. If your anxiety is often triggered by uncertainty, silence, or the fear of losing control, you can explore the psychological materials mentioned in the description and comments. They read there to help you understand anxiety more deeply and learn practical ways to manage fear and regain a sense of inner control. Anxiety didn't disappear from his life, but it no longer runs it, and he learned something essential along the way. Peace isn't found in certainty. It's found in learning how to stay calm when certainty isn't possible.